Welcome to Vantage Point Podcast, a podcast brought to you by NWR Communications and 92 Studio. This podcast is intended for education and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice. G'day, I'm Simon Hinsley and I'm one of the partners at NWR Communications. We're a Melbourne-based investor and media relations firm. And obviously, we deal every day with listed companies, mostly, but also, the management of those and dealing with relationships with the market, whether it's a broker, whether it's a fund manager, analyst, or mum and dad investor. And we sort of look at people as the sort of core of our business, and particularly in terms of what that we invest in and trust. So what we thought we'd do today with today's podcast is get behind Generation Development Group, get behind what drives the CEO and Grant Hackett. It's great to have you here in the office. Obviously, Grant's triple Olympic gold medalist. Had a long career in the pool and has successfully transitioned into the business world. And not that many people would know. I speak to a lot of people in the market who haven't heard of Generation Development Group, and they're sort of shocked that Grant Hackett's CEO, let alone in the business world. So I thought before we sort of get started today, I just sort of wanted to understand how, I've heard you talk it before, but maybe just in short, how you've made the transition from swimming to finance and sort of the mentorship that sort of drove you that way as well.
Yeah, no, good opening question. Thanks, Simon. Great to be joining you today. But for me, it actually felt very natural, to be totally honest. I was always interested in commerce as a young kid. I was trading as a teenager in stocks. So I was always very interested in the business world and anything sort of transactional on that side. I was always very interested in, reading various books and, some of the great success stories like the Packer family that we've seen over the years. I always enjoyed, reading any sort of books that related to business. So for me, studying whilst I was swimming, transitioning into the business world felt like something that was very, very normal and naturally coming down the pipeline for me, regardless of the success, whether that be financially or the gold medals that I was fortunate enough to collect in my swimming career along the way. So for me, it was a matter of going, well, how do you do this transition most successfully? Emotionally, it's one thing, and that's a completely different story to what I'm going through now. But in terms of actually gathering the skill sets, the relationships, the mentorships, I reached out to, funnily enough, gone full circle, my now chairman, a guy by the name of Rob Coombe, back in 2003, and I had lunch with him when I was only 22, 23 years of age, and actually sat down and said, what do I need to be doing right now to transition after the Beijing Olympics, which I knew were in 2008. So I was 5 years out from even considering retirement, but trying to put the pillars in place now to be successful on the other side of my sporting career. And he gave me a lot of guidance around that. Ended up moving into Westpac, BT, had several different roles there, which gave me great experience, everything across sort of distribution to wealth management, to sort of executive management, managing large teams and people, and ended up where I am today. And that was a sort of foundations of all of that. But like anything, it was a difficult transition at the time, because I literally went from being the best in the world at something for many, many years and call it the global CEO of what you do, to then walking down Collins Street on a Monday morning and not being the best at the table. And it can be a big deterrent, I think, for a lot of athletes, having to eat that amount of humble pie at first. But the sooner I realized I should eat that humble pie, start at the photocopier, then move on to the next thing, the next role, and gain that level of competence, as well as the confidence that comes with that along the way, the sooner I would get into a position I'd feel really proud of. So it was literally day two, I remember making that decision that I was there to stay, there to learn and commit to a long career in finance or in the corporate world.
And I've heard you sort of talk before about, in terms of setting goals, and you're such a structured person, both from a swimming background, but also, in a business sense. You've talked in the past about, setting a goal of beating Karen Perkins when, you're probably, 13, 14, 4 laps off his time and whatnot, building that gap. How does someone who's so determined, so structured, so, goal set in a mindset deal with going to the Olympics and coming second? How does that? How do you then push on from that? And what have you sort of learned from that? Coming into the business world as well.
It's really funny. I often think at the last Olympic Games when I finished second for the first time in my main event, it was actually there to set a life lesson for me moving forward in business, because you know, when you ask me at the time, you always give a very media-friendly answer about a silver medal, which is, you know, I did the best I could on the day, blah, blah, blah.
Won the silver, lost the gold.
Yeah, sort of thing, which is a load of BS in my mind. And if I'm being completely honest and forthright with myself now, silver is probably the most disappointing thing a competitive person like me and driven person like me could ever receive. And I have to take my Olympic medals to various things here and there, and I've got 3 silver ones along with 3 gold ones and a bronze one in there, and I look at the ones that are poorly coloured and I feel complete disappointment with them.
Still
it's just my natural emotional response, and I've come to terms. I've realised that that's just the way it's going to be for me moving forward.
They're not going to change colour.
No, they're not going to change colour, and I want them to so badly. Like even when I see that last race, and you know, I didn't lose my pet event for I think it was 11 years. Maluli, out in lane 7. I think, can't I swim him down still? Can't I get there? You know,
I've never asked you this, but I've heard from mates. Could you actually see him out there? Did you know that he was out there, or
no? That was the biggest problem. A lot of people wouldn't appreciate my heat time. Would have won by 2 seconds. Like I finished the Olympic record holder, but not the Olympic champion. Like I broke the Olympic record on the heat. That's how well prepared I was from a training perspective. And then I was really racing a guy named Yuli Pulikov, and then Cochrane, who was on the outside of me, a Canadian swimmer. And I couldn't see him, and I didn't realize that someone had broke, because I thought the 3 of us, we were so far ahead of in the heats that we weren't racing anybody else. It was literally me and those 2 guys. I think it was 7 seconds the next person, or 6 seconds they were away from us in the heats, and everyone was going pretty fast and pretty hard to make that final. So there was no consideration, and I felt so good at the 1,300 meter mark. Instead of breaking them with a lap or 2 to go, I thought I'll break them with 4 laps to go, and I pushed off the wall, and then I saw Maluli out there, and I was like, the first thought that I had, and this is no word of a lie, is, we're lapping someone. And then I thought, this is the Olympic Games. You don't lap people at the Olympic Games. And then, you know, I tried to, I think it was a distance of about 2.6, 2.7 seconds between us. And I think I got to 0.5 or 0.6 of a second, you know, within that last 4 laps. So I couldn't quite get to him. I just didn't have enough time. I think if I pushed off a lap earlier and tried to break it, I might have had enough time. I don't want to take anything away from his gold medal. But, yeah, I just didn't have enough distance left in the race to cover the margin. And it kills me today. I don't want to ever feel like that again. I don't want to feel like that again. I don't want to feel like it in business. And it actually, the big lesson for me is never discount anything. I went into years and years of racing being so well prepared, looking at all competitors, and that one I discounted all those competitors, where it made me an ignorant competitor that day and cost me a gold medal. So, you know, in business now, the more success I have, I feel like I'm actually more humbled, because I feel like you're closer to a mistake. And so for me, my span of paranoia, and I call it healthy paranoia, almost widens, because I think things can go more wrong. So if I see someone in our business with a little bit of hubris or getting a little too comfortable, complacency, does my head in, and I honestly don't stand for it. It's just the attitude that I think is ready for failure. Yeah.
Before we get on to Generation Development Group and Gen Life, again, I've obviously know you very well. You've got 3 kids, soon to be 4 in August. Charlene, etc. You're still rowing. You never ever swim, which people would find baffling. That Grant Hackett
scared of the bathtub,
hates swimming now. How do you fit everything in? So, like, in terms of for those listening, and probably more so for myself, how do you work with structures of getting up early? Is it sort of setting out, planning the week? I deal with a number of clients. You have to call a CEO quite often. They'll take a couple of days to get back. I was at dinner the other night and mentioned that you missed my call, and sure enough, 2 minutes later you call back. You're always on it. How do you sort of go about life in terms of being so organised?
It's funny. I mean, the old saying is, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. I think there's just so much fat in your day you don't realise until you start to fill it up with other things that are meaningful. And obviously, full family life, and I spend a lot of time with my family. I don't feel like the huge level of commitment and travel that I have with my job actually takes away from my family. I feel like I'm super close with my kids, and have a wonderful relationship with my wife. Some of the things that I've stopped doing, if I'm being completely honest, is I don't drink. I went to not drink for a year when I went through a difficult period post a divorce, the first marriage that I had, and just really wanted to collect in my head. And I thought, let's not drink for a year, and let's take some time out to really make sure I look after myself both physically, mentally, emotionally, because that's what I really needed to do. And I got to the end of a year and I was like, I don't even like drinking that much, so why am I doing it? And then I got into this role, sort of post all of that, and I really like being focused. And I find those are the sorts of things in your life that can obviously take your focus away. For me, it is all about structure. So I do get up early. I do work out really, really early in the morning. Then play with the kids at home, get into the office.
So what time do you wake up?
So it's not ridiculously early, but it's probably 5:30 each morning.
Still pretty early.
It's not, but the thing is, it's later than what I used to, right? It feels like a luxury compared to my previous career.
4:45.
Yeah, 4:45 every single morning. I used to rise, and look, I have an amazing support structure too. Like my wife is a phenomenal person. When it gets to the weekend, she knows I need to catch up on a bit of sleep, particularly if there's been a lot of travel through the week. So she'll let me sleep in and keep the kids away from me for a little bit. So those are all the little things that you need to do, whether it's it doesn't mean you don't have to drink and all that sort of stuff. I'm just doing stuff that works for me, but it's all those little things for me, like not drinking, making sure I get a sleep in on the weekend, getting up early, getting the exercise out, because that balances the stress out of the day and the things that you have to deal with. That really add up to, me being, responsive to things like I was to you on that call that you just referred to before, and being across everything in business that you need to be in such a fast-moving, changing environment. And also aligning to, if I'm going to have some pretty big goals, I've got to make sure I've got a lifestyle and preparation around a lifestyle to support it. Otherwise it's just BS. I'm not, I can have a big goal and you can put that up on the wall, but if you're not actually living a lifestyle that's leading towards that big goal, then it's never going to happen. That's called a dream or being deluded. and I hate that.
I think that's where I was when I was swimming.
Well, a lot of people actually are in that space. A lot of people want to be high performers. They want to achieve big things, but then they lead a lifestyle that's not actually commensurate with those actions and behaviors and principles that need to produce that outcome. So, and I find for me, I'm just really quite probably naturally disciplined around it, or I was just so well trained from sport. It's just ingrained in me that I know to get X, I've got to do Y, so, and if I don't do that, then I'm never going to produce that outcome. And I know I'm kidding myself. And I've been given enough feedback when I am kidding myself to know when I am as well. You get to know yourself very well.
But again, before we get into the business side, you talked about not drinking. Obviously gives you much more clarity and time. In terms of mental health, and I've heard you sort of talk about it before, but in terms of swimming, it's got a pretty bad checkered history in terms of blow-ups and whatnot. Obviously, and troubles, and I've heard different athletes, and been around you amongst those athletes talking about having depression and whatnot. Why do you think that is? I've sort of always thought that you're under the water for 25% more of the day. You're growing up from whether it's 4 in your case or 10, 12, swimming, never having a life really, and not having a purpose. What do you sort of? It's a real problem. What do you sort of think it's down to, and how do you sort of combat it?
I almost think high performance or high pressure environments exacerbate a problem that's already there. So, the percentage of the community that we're going to go through depression or going to go through an eating disorder or going to go through something in life, probably a high performance or high pressure environment like swimming, which really does take a lot away from your life in general because the commitment is so large and there is a lot of pressures at the top level, like any sport, is going to expose cracks, and those cracks are going to widen to canyons. And I think that's what sport does for you. So I think the shortcomings that I have as a person were probably just found out, or, you're digging through the layers of self when you're in that sort of environment, because to truly perform at your best, to be mentally prepared well enough to perform at an Olympic Games when you're expected to win, and then to do that consistently back to back for many, many years, it's like the old onion. You're getting into layers that other people don't get into because they're not in an environment that's forcing that out of them. So I think as you get into those layers, it's got to expose weaknesses, and I'm no different. But the thing is, I think as an athlete, what makes it quite unique, and I think where it could blow up, as the sort of language that you used before, is because you're taught not to be vulnerable along the way. If you're injured, find a way to get over it and get the performance. If you're sick, find a way to get through it. Get the best help, get the best physiologist and doctors around you to make sure you're back into shape. Never show a competitor a weakness. Never ever. So therefore, you get to a point in your life you're not showing yourself any weaknesses because you grew up to be a gladiator in this environment. And if you showed weakness, it was going to reflect in outcomes, and that was not the outcomes that you're looking for. So you can't take that into real life. It actually does the opposite, because after a while, when you start denying yourselves of those vulnerabilities, it comes back and just bites you twice as hard. And I think that's kind of what happened to me in my life, to be totally honest. Things that were probably minor problems turn into big problems after time, because you're denying yourself the support and help and guidance that you probably needed.
And just trying to get through it. And
trying to pretend, because that's what you were trying to do, right? Like I never show vulnerability. I was always in leadership positions, whether it was in sport, now in business. Always in friend circles, people would ask me for advice. So I was like, well, I'm that guy. That's my identity. So if I show you,
can't turn it around.
I can't flip this, right? So that's just not going to work. And it's amazing. This all sounds so simple in a conversation, but it took a long time to appreciate and understand. And even my wife now, when I am vulnerable, she says she's really proud of me, because I'm still not good at it. But I do try and actually practice it, because I know it actually makes me a better partner, it makes me a better father, but it also makes me much more effective, I think, in the business world as well.
In terms of, when did you retire?
2008. Yeah.
So you had you retired for 6.5 years.
Yeah.
And having swum when I was much younger, that comeback was just incredible. People don't understand how hard it is, particularly for swimmers. 200 to come back. Made the Russian World Championships. A bit of a taboo word now. But won bronze. What sort of, without going into too much detail, obviously had problems throughout that period in terms of making the comeback. Why did you make the comeback? Was it a sort of purpose, try and find yourself again, or what sort of was it?
It was funny. I spent 6 or 7 years in the business world then, had quite a few successes, went through the divorce period and missing out on spending time with my children and all those things that would, really hurt me emotionally quite a bit and put me in quite a bit of distress. And I kind of got to a point where I thought I'll move home, be closer to mum and dad. And then the next step was let's get fit again.
Roll down to Miami.
Yeah. And I just asked Dennis, my old coach, I said, do you mind if I jump in with the guys every now and again and girls and just have a bit of fun? I wasn't planning on a comeback. Yeah. And then 3 weeks later, we looked at each other and we was like, I can still do this. And so we got a bit excited about it. And being the goal setting sort of person I am, I thought,
you can't just jump in for a swim and.
No, it's not the way my mind works. And I recognize it across the board now. And so that competitive nature kind of kicked in very, very quickly. And 6 months later, I was, in the top 10 in the world in 2 races in the 200 and 400, which was, I'd never, ever expected to get back to that level at all, rather than in such a short time frame. I was
6
quite surprised from jumping in the water. From jumping in the water to then going to the trials, because that was literally, I could only compete because you've got to get back on the drug testing list as well. So I could only compete 2 weeks before I did those times for the first time in a proper competition, which qualified me for the national titles. And then I went to the national titles and placed and got on the team to go to Kazan and Russia for the World Championships. So, it was. I wish I stopped them, because I was like, I did something, but never
tried to go to.
Yeah, because I got so much publicity, which I really didn't enjoy. I didn't. The reason I think that comeback was so successful is because I did it for purest reasons and for myself, exactly. And then all of a sudden, it all flipped again. It became this public and external
try and go to Olympics
expectation. Go back, go to the Olympics. You're now the oldest person ever to qualify for an Australian team. You'll be the oldest person to qualify for an Olympic team in swimming, and the first person to go to a 4th Olympics for swimming. So it was all these other things, and I felt like I was then doing it for everybody else. And in hindsight, I should have just stopped, because I'd achieved a goal that I never thought I would achieve. And I was really happy and I was really content with that. And it probably gave me confidence to go back in and do other things that I wanted to achieve in my life, rather than sort of probably being a bit of a downfall for me. Because again, I think when you're doing things for the wrong reasons, it starts to expose weaknesses inside you and questionable things that you probably, disconnected from your value set.
One of the other great champions, Michael Phelps, you spent a year you lived with him?
Basically a year, yeah.
When was that?
2017.
2017.
Yeah. And I'd lived with him a bit before that as well.
Can you talk us through, so obviously you needed to sort of get away and whatnot. How was he to deal with, like in terms of you working your way back up? And obviously he's had his troubles as well, and he's an absolute freak.
Yeah.
Can you sort of talk, because you were swimming with him like more so casually back then?
Just casually, yeah. But then we get competitive as we do. But it was funny. I had a few dramas here, and just kind of thought I need to get away from this. I needed to get away from people knowing who I was before they even met me. And the States was an opportunity. I mean, he was one of the first guys when I went through some difficult times to reach out to me and said, come and stay with me, So, that's where it all kind of initiated. And then went overseas and, I get along with his wife, his kids, all that sort of stuff really, really well. We've always had a very tight relationship, Michael and I think from the very first time we trained together in 2003. And we always had a huge amount of respect for one another and our performances. So there was always that kind of underpinning our relationship. But then we probably just, as we grew older and we got to know ourselves more, go through our ups and downs and the vulnerabilities came out, we actually had probably a stronger bond than we ever knew. So that kind of experience, I think, was probably just as healthy for me as it was for him. Because we would speak so openly about our lives.
Because you're basically in the same sort of train,
and we could trust one another. And I was kind of, he doesn't have the luxury of being removed from any environment where people don't know him, right? Like Phelps is known globally and will be for the rest of his life. Like it's just the way it is. It's going to be for 10 generations down the line, given 23 Olympic gold medals, which is just freakish. And the next best is 9, Carl Lewis. So, and then Usain Bolt at 8, who was at 9. So, you look at that and you just think, what a remarkable athlete. But it wasn't anything to do with that. We had an appreciation for sport. It was more the emotional connection that I had with Michael that gave me an opportunity to probably heal and really work through stuff that I've never worked through before, allow me and give me the ability to have a conversation I'm having with you right now that I would have never had before that.
No, it would have been all closed doors.
Correct. And for me, I know that's the human side. Michael's really good at doing that for himself now because he, probably even worse than what I've been through, and he's quite open about that. Like he goes through depression. I've never had any sort of manic depression. I've had what's called situational depression because of circumstances, but he sort of more goes through those, highs and lows more consistently and is a real advocate for mental health, which is awesome. So, I think just spending that time with him at a guy to guy level and just getting close and doing activities that we enjoyed. We'd go for a swim and we'd do it because we enjoyed it, not because we were training for the Olympic Games and the pressure of the world around you. So, it was an opportunity to heal. It grew a probably bond with someone. Like, he sends me a video of him and Boomer the other day saying, pronounce this word because they love our accent so much. And so Eddie and I, my 3-year-old, actually said the word and pronounced it was some amphibious animal that I can't even think of now. But anyway,
that's big enough.
That's kind of the relationship that we have. That's good enough.
That's impressive. Moving on to Generation Development Group and Generation Life. How long have you been in business?
This will be coming in 6 years.
2018?
Yeah. September 2017.
Tell us what they do. And sort of what the journey's been since you've been in the key sort of leadership role. Obviously, it's been phenomenal growth.
No, we've had a great time there. It's been a great business to be a part of. The reason we got into it, Rob, again, my mentor back in sort of 2003, where that all kicked off. We were for a long time looking at this company that sold investment bonds, and we thought it would be great if there was changes in super. We'd get into this business again because it's the best after tax structure that's out there from a investment point of view. So the opportunity came along with changes in 2017. He did a private placement in the business, and through that, I guess, mechanism brought me on board. I ran sales for a year. He was executive chairman. He said, look, I'm going to go to non-exec chairman. If you do a good enough job, I'll put you in the CEO position, but you've got to prove that to me, because he's very performance orientated, which I like, because to me, goal setting, performance orientated provides clarity in an environment where a business can lack clarity a lot of the time with the wrong leaders in place. So we had that very open and honest, conversation about the business, what we wanted to do with it, and set some goals. At that stage, it was doing just over $100 million worth of inflows. You fast forward to today, October 2018, I took the reins after a 72% increase in sales in the first year I was running that team. We now do that in sort of 10 weeks, not full year. In terms of investment bond sales, we've now gone into lifetime annuities, but not your traditional lifetime annuities that were fixed interest linked. We've got investment linked lifetime annuities where you can choose your own investment, guaranteed income for life, additional access for the age pension. Obviously, that plays into the retirement space and that whole thematic of baby boomers going into retirement now. So we really love that because we've got the life insurance license sitting in Generation Life where we can distribute these sorts of products. Then on the other side, a business that we basically own half of is Lonsec, which is a very, very well-known research business and has a very credible name in that space, but also has a great asset management business. And was the reason we bought that was because of that whole trend post-Royal Commission of a lot of flows going to their SMA category, but into these independent brands because of that structural change. When we bought that business, it had 659 million as of 30 June 20 in funds under management. Fast forward to today, it's fast approaching $8 billion 2.5 years later. Yeah. So, we've had this huge amount of growth, across all the sort of key metrics and KPIs that you would have in the business. But it's funny, I sit here, I'm always uncomfortable even talking about it because I think, well, what's the next step? What's the next goal? And, I have difficulty talking about results because it's such a reversal thing for me. You go out on a roadshow a couple months after results and people are talking about the year that or the half that was. And you're like, I'm sitting there in my mind going, this is so obsolete, this conversation, because we've got to be forward thinking around what are we doing now? Where are we innovating? What are our competitors up to? What's the macro environment look like? What's the backdrop? Where should we be celebrating? Where should we be hard on ourselves and questioning ourselves a little bit more? So, it's kind of the mindset, I think, that's filtered in the business from Rob and I and through, some of the people like Felipe that who, of course, is our GM of cross sales, marketing and operations, all of our client-facing areas. And, we're just constantly looking for the next thing, next opportunity, next result, and always innovating, particularly on the product side. We have a product that's great along strategy because it's strategically based. So the strategies for financial advisors are great. And so that gives us a lot of open doors to have conversations with advisors, with their clients, and solve a lot of problems, which I'm really proud of as a brand. That's what we do. This investment-linked lifetime annuity really helps solve longevity risk and sequency risk. And allows people to go into retirement and spend their money and have a good time and know that they're not going to run out of money. So I think of my mum and dad in that category who was 77 years of age. And I think, it's pretty cool that we're actually making an impact into the Australian community and to mums and dads' lives. I also really like that aspect of what we do too.
And how many full-time employees, does the business have now?
Yeah, so look, if you counted the full-time employees plus all the contractors, it'd be getting close to 100 now, all up. So, it's probably the official number sits between 60 and 70, but you count all the contractors that you've had on there for a number of years, it's probably closer to 100. When we started, it was about 24 in the business. So you can see the amount of growth. Funds under management was between 600 and 700 million. It's fast closing on $2.5 billion at the moment. So it's changed quite materially. And we're always looking at what are the new product categories that we can go into that we can disrupt slightly. I think in financial services, we've seen a lot of, distraction over the last few years, whether it was Royal Commission, whether it's COVID. And I think that creates opportunities for, businesses of our size. We're not a boutique. We're not a boutique anymore. So we don't have that thin P&L to operate on where every dollar you've got to watch, we can actually invest back into the business and actually grow. But we're not a big insto where we've got a whole heap of red tape and bureaucracy around us that stops us from doing things or innovating or going through 5 different committees to get approval for something small. So we've got that nimbleness, but now we've got enough firepower to do stuff that's meaningful. And I think that's why you're seeing more product innovation from our business over the last couple of years than ever.
And in terms of, I think I might have mentioned it before, but again, when you're training, you want feedback. When you've got staff and employees, you're used to getting feedback, blatantly. How do you sort of combat that in terms of, understanding that everyone's different, everyone wants feedback differently? How do you sort of look at leadership and sort of mentorship within Generation Life?
Yeah, it's funny. There's a spectrum of feedback, ability to receive feedback, right? And I look at it on the extreme end of feedback that is required, that is blunt, is like if you're an SAS soldier or a Navy SEAL, right? Like you're going to get feedback on the spot because it's life or death.
Yeah.
So, and you got to get it and it's going to be delivered in a way that you don't care how offensive it is because it's probably going to save my life and I need to do it to make the right decision and improve on whatever that performance is. for that particular mission. Then on the other end, there's fluffy stuff, right? Just telling people what they want to hear, not actually giving them feedback, not seeing them improve, not calling them out, not keeping them accountable, all that sort of stuff. So you've got this spectrum of feedback. I felt like business, when I first went into it, was probably on the lower side of that, probably on the second quartile, for argument's sake. I felt like there was a lot of tiptoeing around issues, and it's not because people didn't want to say it, it's they didn't know how to say it. I always say you can give direct feedback, but just give it respectfully. Yeah. But people need to hear that. And also, you've got to have managers in place that have got to have enough EQ to understand the person that they're talking to. Yeah, like for you, I could give you direct feedback, but could be another person which will find highly offensive and resign tomorrow. And but you could be just as valued in the organization. So I've got to know, how do I actually give you direct feedback if you're sensitive to that, and get you on the journey of receiving feedback more readily and more easily. And how do I not over apply feedback to someone that's really good at receiving it? Like my CFO, Terrence, he's awesome at feedback. I can be as blunt and as sharp and as direct as I want to be, and the guy just gets it, doesn't take it personally, moves on.
Bulletproof,
yeah, and just makes the next move. Like it's awesome, and he does it to me too. We can have that open and honest conversation about anything really within the business. And look, don't get me wrong, it's still respectful, but it can be extremely direct to one another, and you can't have that across the organization. So you've got to understand the levels of feedback. But to your point, Simon, around sport, it is like you get to you know what it's like. You get to the other end of the pool, you get yelled at. It's like, lift your elbow, do this on your right arm. And like, you're thinking about winning Olympics, not how offensive the feedback might be. And you're like, geez, I better lift that elbow, get my technique right, because you're all about, it's objective to you because you're all about the performance and the outcome that you're looking for. So it doesn't matter how
you're on the same team.
Yeah. You know, everyone's trying to work towards that goal. So regardless of how it comes down the pipeline, you just take it on board and you just get on with it. You don't even you don't think through how it felt. You think through what it's trying to achieve. And I think that's one of the nuances of sport and business where it's quite different. And there is no, siren after 80 minutes that has a definitive scoreboard every single day. I think if you had that, it would create a bit of a different environment and feel. So, so we try and create that feedback circle within the business. We try and have open and honest conversations. But at the end of the day, approaching it with dignity and respect is really, really important. Like that integrity around that conversation is key to us. And whether that's removing someone from the firm or giving someone glowing feedback for a great performance and a great cheer, it doesn't matter. It has to be delivered the right way. So that the fundamental value set that sits behind that's first. And then we try and get on with shifting the culture within the business. And we do that. Like I have people really junior in the business because I think we do have a pretty good feedback loop system. We're not perfect by any means. They will walk into my office and can talk about their mental health issues or some of the challenges that they've had in their life more broadly.
Approachable enough.
Yeah. And I think that's an awesome culture to be able to have that level of transparency with one another without getting, too personal, so to speak.
Yeah.
So, but it needs to be at the right level. And you're constantly working on that. It's not something that you just get. Every day you're trying to chip away at it to improve it, to evolve it, because your performance is never perfect, no matter how good you think you are. Like when you're Roger Federer, then all of a sudden you get Nadal who comes along and beats you in Grand Slams, and then you get Djokovic who does it too. You know what I mean? Like you're never good enough. Yeah, it's always moving forward. It's always shifting. The environment around you is shifting, and so are your competitors. So you got to be onto it all the time.
I was having a bit of a chuckle there because it makes me think about reflecting on myself about having thicker skin. Growing up, as a swimmer as well. Going to train at Miami, and really excited to meet one of my idols, and got a little bit carried away with the reef tanning oil and rocked up, basically beetroot, and never met you before, and just didn't introduce yourself either. But in front of probably 100 people said, "Ooh, what happened to you? They paint you red." So it's just those sort of experiences, and I knew that you'd be a great leader. Post that you knew how to deliver me feedback and make sure I was a better person.
It's funny. Just before doing this session, I caught one of my direct reports in the boardroom, and he was meeting a customer, and the customer, gave us feedback or something. He goes, "Oh, you don't mind if I give you feedback?" I was, "No." I said, "We love feedback," and my direct report, I won't say his name, but he's like, oh, Grant loves feedback. And it's very, very direct. So don't worry, he'll be happy to receive it. So, and I said to him, it's called constructive criticism. So
it's not, I wouldn't even say criticism. Criticism is a negative word.
It is. I think, just trying to move forward, and we've got a goal and we've all signed up to that goal. Like if you look around our office, not our outside office, customer facing office, but on the inside, we've got our vision up on the wall everywhere. So if you don't know where the business is heading, you've been walking around with your eyes closed the whole time. So, we're very clear on where we're going, and we've all signed up for that. So if you join our business, you know the type of culture you're getting involved with. It's not for everybody. I don't think every sort of environment's for everybody. It's we want to attract a certain type of someone. That's talent that wants high performance, wants a little bit of pressure, wants to set ambitious goals,
wants to be better, basically,
and wants to challenge themselves and innovate as a person, as well as within the industry that we're in.
I was going to say, in terms of, you swim, you train 10 times a week, 100K a week, it's that gold medal. What I like what we do, with NWA, that there's always a bit of a scoreboard in terms of write a good announcement, do a good roadshow. There's scoreboard in terms of share price. How does it differ? Running a listed business, having the share price that basically you don't have control of. It's whoever wants to buy or sell on a day. And do you get that same fulfillment, or do you get it through the employees in terms of them delivering outcomes as to what you did during swimming?
Oh, it's all of the above, to be totally honest. One of the things that improved my performance in swimming was becoming team captain. At the time when that happened, my coach was really worried because, when you execute in swimming, it's obviously a very individual-based performance. Everything else is team-orientated, but that performance is very individual. And so he was worried if I was going to be team captain, it was going to take away from that performance. And it was funny, I had my best year ever that year and got World Swim of the Year over Phelps.
Was it 06?
05. 05. Yeah. So broke one of Ian Thorpe's world records in the 800. Just had an absolute cracking year. And I found for me that the leadership side of things, when you genuinely, and I always, preface this with genuinely, give to people and want to see them do well, that it comes back to you tenfold. Yeah. And that was the experience I had there. So I've learned that on the leadership side, and I really enjoy that. Like I genuinely love seeing people do well, or I love seeing people step up to a level where they thought they couldn't. I think that's just awesome. And so I think for me, the leadership stuff kind of naturally came through just who I am, and wanting to put time and effort into people. The other aspect that you're speaking about, the uncontrollables, I focus on what I can control. I've learned that from sport. In this sort of a macro backdrop that we've got right now with, interest rates, inflation, uncertainty, texting, lots of layoffs, banks going down overseas, all this sort of stuff is makes people panic, and it makes people actually spin their wheels. I always get back to our leadership team and everyone within the business when I'm talking to the business at our town hall is like, guys, it's going to be a tough operating environment, but let's focus on what we can control. And we can control
the expectations.
Correct. And so I think that almost instills a sense of calmness when you get back to going, okay, well, I can't always control a share price, right? Like the buy and sell on that on a daily basis and the intraday trading can really have an upsetting day and be down 5%, or it could be up 10% and think, oh yeah, it's all me, when it's actually not. So you can't also take credit on the upside of these things. But over time, I think things work themselves out. If you're consistent in business, if you're consistent in delivering what you said you would, not over-promising the market, I think is always important. And I think that's always been important in sport when you're managing the media expectations around your performance too. So kind of got used to that in that environment as well. I think that consistency then starts to play through in the results and the share price. But do I get the same fulfillment out of sport? I really do. I love it. Yeah, the more pressure and the more and I just find it exciting. And then working with really smart people who challenge me, the competitive environment too, when the competitors come back with stuff that's really good, they're better than us, I'm like, it fires something in me that it just gets me excited. Where I know other people get daunted in those sorts of environments, but you can probably tell now it gets me excited because I'm thinking about it. That sort of stuff's what drives me. So it's not like this 4-year journey or every year, world champs, com games, obviously all that stuff in between. But it's almost a bit more of an everyday thing in business. And I call it, you almost got to be a corporate athlete. So, and to perform well and to deal with those sorts of pressures, you've got to eat well, you got to exercise, you got to have a really balanced lifestyle. You got to get enough sleep. Like anyone who says to me that I get 3 or 4 hours sleep a night, I'm like, oh yeah, no, I don't want to deal with you because you're not functioning properly on that.
You're going to blow up as well.
Exactly. I like people who, are able to create a sense of balance in a very, high performing, high pressure life. If you can do that, then you're sort of mastering that balance and that skill to have sustained performance. And in business, that's really, really important. So yeah, for me, so those attributes that you get out of sport, I definitely find I'm getting, like, I love what I do. I love who I work with. I love the ambitions that we have as a business, and I find it super fulfilling.
I certainly think in terms of having worked together for a few years, and whether it's Felipe or Terence, it is genuinely good fun. It's serious, but I think life can get too serious, and actually got to stop and enjoy it as well. Sometimes.
It's funny because people hear me talk and they would probably think I'm super serious, right? Like, because the goals are very meaningful and serious to me. But I'm actually pretty lighthearted as a guy. Like, if you hang out with me and we have lunch, and as you know, Simon, like, I'll be joking around and having fun. And I think you actually need that in a high performance environment because the stress and I guess ambition is quite heavy. So you need moments of lightness. And I think bringing humor into your day is really, really important because I think it lightens it for everybody. It lightens, the big goals that we have. If you're able to bring a little bit of humor and fun into it, and again, respectful, it's not supposed to be placed upon people. But at the end of the day, I think having that genuine sense of fun and enjoyment and pleasure with what you do and lightness is really, really important aspect of high performance. And I think people underestimate that. They think it needs to be serious the whole time and a stern face. And it's like, Rob Coombe, who's one of the most successful guys in financial services, is my chairman, executive chairman of CFS, and was the chairman of MLC, CEO of BT. Hugely successful individual. The lightness that I can have with him, but then when it comes to business, it's just so focused and intense. But the lightness that I can have with him on the other side balances it all out and makes it so enjoyable because he's a guy who's very values orientated and very respectful, but he's also very funny, But then, there's a side to all of us when it comes time to knuckling down and getting the result. We know what we need to do. So I think, that dynamic in business or sport is a really important aspect of success, and I think people don't recognize that. Doesn't mean you don't. Fun is not like going out and not doing the work and not showing up to training. Fun has been able to have a joke in the middle of the hardest session that you're doing and actually start to smile.
That's certainly.
Or if someone comes in sunburnt and, we'll have a laugh. There was 100 people there. There was 99 people laughing. So one wasn't. I reckon that's a win.
I was just crying in my goggles.
They just leaked.
Yes. Again, in terms of, I knew you from sort of afar, met you in sort of professional sense. You've been through a lot, frankly. Do you think this is the best place you've ever been? Like, for me personally, like it looks like, I'm speaking to those in the market, and just our general mates, it feels like you're the most settled that you've probably ever been.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think that's unequivocal. And I think, look, that just comes with maturity and age as well. Like, as you hit your 40s in particular, I think you really appreciate, you're old firstly, let's be honest, so great skincare, so I don't look too old, so treatment, but whatever. At the end of the day, I think with that maturity, all of the experiences that you've had, good and bad. Like, the bad ones are often the learnings, right? Let's be honest in life. Like, the bad stuff is honestly where we all get the biggest lessons and make the biggest changes. And so all of the stuff I've been through, whether it's been sport, whether it's been in my personal life, whether it's been in business, because there is more failures than there are successes in all of that. That's what people don't realize. They just talk about the successes when they perceive you to be successful. But I had so many failures through that process. It's incredible. I just have a good ability to get back up and keep going. That's probably one of my big strengths as a person. So yeah, but the place I'm in now in terms of, like, I look at my personal life, I have an amazing wife, doesn't try and change who I am because I am full on, I am tense, I do spend, I do have big goals, I work long hours, but she supports all of it. Like, she supports who I am. Well, Oh, she says to me, I know what I signed up for. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the coolest thing. The coolest thing you can ever hear from your partner is like, I know what I signed up for. Like, that's her words. And it doesn't make you feel guilty about who you are. And because we've all got plenty of faults. And when you're delivering good outcomes in life that are perceived by other people as, achievements, they come at a cost, and they often come to the cost of the people closest to you as well. So to have support around that's really important. So that just makes me happy. I love the people I work with in the business. I love what we're trying to achieve. I love the genuineness that comes into our business, and the people in there that go above and beyond to do things that I don't even ask for anymore. Like they'll take a call whenever, they'll deliver whenever, they'll hit deadlines that are pretty sharp. Yeah, exactly. Proactive is actually one of our values. So proactivity. And then, I do try and get out a bit of that competitiveness, in me. I have a rowing group that forms part of, once a year. That just started in COVID. I'd never been I don't row on the water. I've never actually been on the water. It's only on the C2 in the gym, but had this great group of people. One of my friends got me involved with, and now we do that at the start of every year. Matt Target, an old Olympic mate of mine who worked at Google in New York, and said join this group of people, and I'm rowing with, and he convinced me. Like, it took a lot of convincing, because I just looked at that thing. I was like, that's just painful, and I know what I'm going to do to myself on it. And I ended up joining that, and the people that were on there were all high performers in their field. So I actually made this friendship circle. Now that basically 4 years later, we're all still together, we're still texting. Our coach was the president of the New York Stock Exchange, Thomas Farley. Was president of the stock exchange for about 5 or 6 years. Has become a very good friend of mine. So I've met these awesome people. So it's amazing when you get off your backside and do things and participate in groups and get into all sort of things in life. Like, you really get a lot of value out of it.
Again, not being too comfortable, right?
Yeah, I think, it's always taking a bit of a risk, right? Like, as soon as you get out of your comfort zone, like, it's scary and it's intimidating, and you're worried the outcome that might be produced, but it's, the only outcome that's produced if you succeed or failure is growth. One feels better than the other, of course, but either way you're going to grow if you're stepping out your comfort zone, and it's in a good or it's in a bad way, but either way you're actually going to make a shift forward. And I think the sooner you recognize that within yourself, the better. And probably the other aspect, just to answer your question before, that's probably made me happier now, is that I'm honest with myself. Where before I'd kind of built a bit of a machine in swimming psychologically, which did not serve me more broadly in my life, where I've now been able to unlock that and be honest, have honest conversations with myself, with people around me that I'm close to, because not everything's always perfect, and life's no different to what it was beforehand. There are plenty of it. There's just as many imperfections now as there was back then. It's the dealing with them and the openness and the vulnerability of it now that I'm just good at. I've had to train that weakness within myself. That still will always remain as a weakness. But as long as you're across it and you're honest with it, you keep making steps forward.
And in terms of generation development group / Gen Life, where does it sort of go in the next 3 to 5 years? What's the sort of aspirational goal there?
Look, it's more of the same of what you've seen the last few years. We've got some pretty definitive goals, and I'm not going to sort of disclose those here. That's internal. It's a listed company and all that sort of jazz. But, we're very aspirational. We know what we want to do in all of our product categories. Changes to superannuation with balances over 3 million being double taxed. That creates opportunities for an after-tax paying product structure like our investment bonds. So, we've got to be smart. We've got to leverage all those legislative changes that are coming through and the different markets that we play in. And look, at the end of the day, we've got to sit there and we've got to make products that people want. We stay very close to our financial advisors and to our customers, and every time we're developing something, we just ask them. So we're not we're a bunch of product teams that sort of sit behind closed doors in a black box, kind of coming out with something
hand in glove sort of thing.
Thinking we know what people want. So I think if we can drive more of that within our business, I think that produces better outcomes from a product point of view, from the strategies that we can deploy through our financial advice networks. And then that's just going to drive outcomes. And I think if we always sort of set those principles in place in the business, set ourselves high performing goals every single year, then, we'll eventually achieve them. So you understand how we approach things. People say, well, how do you do that in business compared to how you do it in sport? Well, if you looked through our strategy, our internal strategy, every single business unit has a definition of success and failure within it, because you have to define failure as well. So like for me, success is gold, failure is silver. Some people have a really broad range, right? Making a final, getting a medal. our mind's really narrow. So we define that, whether it's in sales, whether it's in marketing and our brand awareness, where we have metrics in there that we can control and contribute to. And we define what success looks like, but we also define failure. Then we develop the scorecards for the individuals and the teams off the back of that. So we're trying to create that high performance culture within the team, and I think that's got us to the level where we are now, but we've got a lot more ambitions and things that we think we can achieve and drive, and we're going to have some bumps along the way. That is normal as part of success, but that's not going to deter us. We'll just keep going through that.
It's in a very good position in terms of tailwinds and obviously the culture and leadership that the company sits itself in within your hands. So it's been really good fun to chat. It's always a pleasure to work together. And if you did want to find out more about Generation Development Group, obviously it's listed on the ASX under the ticker GDG, and the Gen Life website's generationlife.com.au, is it?
Yeah, that's one, GenLife, yeah,
genlife.com.au.
Yep.
But thanks very much for coming on, Grant. Always a pleasure.
No worries. Thanks for having me on. Always great to have a chat and be so open and honest with you, Simon. Appreciate the support from NWR as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Aki.